Do you have one or more horses? Are you tired of paying for endless farrier fees? Or are you just curious about what the farrier is doing to your horse's feet? Well, there is an alternative to paying for the farrier fees, and you can do it right at home. But before you can begin, you need to prepare your area and you need to gather your tools. Your tools are all the basic farriery tools. There is a hoof jack, which some professionals debate on using this item, but I'll talk about this later. A hoof pick, a hoof knife, a rasp, and nippers. After you gather your tools, you need to make sure your area is nice and quiet and free of distractions and nothing that can possibly scare your horse. You need to brush your horse if he's dirty, because if you don't brush your horse, you can end up very, very dirty, and trust me, it's a very nasty job if the horse is not semi-clean. If it's summer or if you live in an area with a whole lot of flies or mosquitoes or anything like that, you need to spray him down with some citronella scented fly spray. If you don't, while you're trimming his hooves, he can be swishing his tail, and that can cause distractions, and that can cause him to lose balance and fall and lead to a whole bunch of other things. Another thing to remember while you're trimming your horse's hooves, or when you're even learning how to do it, you always need assistance. It can be very dangerous if you don't have assistance. The horse can trip, and you need to have someone there to help you in whatever situations you may get in. Now that you've gathered all your tools and the area is okay and quiet and everything, you can start the process. You need to pick the hooves out, making sure to clear all the dirt, and if you have a brush on your hoof pick, make sure to brush it all out just so you can see all the structures of the hoof. Next, you need to take your hoof knife and scrape out the sole. When you're done with this, it should look white and it should have some little bitty black lines running through it. These are okay. Next, you need to make sure that all the hoof sole is white, with the exception of the frog, the grooves, the heel, and the overhanging hoof wall that needs to be trimmed. Next, you need to position the hoof between your knees and make sure to bend with your knees and not your back. If you bend with your back, and trust me on this, if you bend with your back, it will hurt very, very badly when you go to stand up straight. So you always need to remember to bend with your knees. Now you can trim. You need to start at one apex, go around to the toe, and trim to the other apex. When you're trimming the horse's hooves, to make sure you're doing it correctly so that the horse's feet will wear correctly when he's walking on them, you need to trim at this angle. You don't need to trim the horse's foot flat. If you trim too much of the hoof wall off and it's flush with the sole, the horse can have problems walking and they can get sore, just like when you cut your fingernails too short and they get sore. Next, you need to take the coarse side of the hoof rasp and, looking straight down the hoof, rasp it and make sure it looks even. Get all the jagged edges out and make sure it looks flush. Next, you need to get the hoof jack. This is the step that some professional farriers debate on, because the horse can kick the jack or for whatever reason get it caught up underneath them, and it can be dangerous, but you need to know how to use it properly before you use one of these. You need to take the peg side of the hoof rasp, or if you have an interchangeable one, you need to put the peg attachment in. You need to put it in front of the horse and rest his front foot on the peg. Make sure that you never use these on his hind feet, because they can get caught up underneath him and it can get very dangerous. After you have his foot up on the hoof jack, make sure you're standing on the appropriate places on the hoof jack so that it won't tip over and that it stays steady while you're working on his feet. Next, you need to take the coarse side of the rasp and go around the very edges of the hoof. You should be looking down over the hoof and to see the outside edges. Trim down or file down any coarse edges that you see and try to make it smooth. it looks smooth enough, take the fine side of the rasp and just smooth it out. It's more of a cosmetic reason. You don't have to do this if it's just maintenance, but if you want them to look good, fine them or smooth them out with the fine side. After you do that, some people do this, some people don't. You take the rasp and you very, very gently go around the hoof wall, the outside of it that you actually see when the horse is walking. You can just rough it up very lightly, but do not take any depth off of this. You're now officially done with the process. Some people like to put a hoof sealant or a hoof oil on their horse's foot after trimming to make sure either no infection sets in if they're open, if they have laminitis, which is a whole different ballgame, but it's optional and it's completely up to you. I don't use it personally, so. I have now explained all of the major points of how to trim a horse's hooves. I have showed you how to A, prepare your horse and your tools, B, actually trim the hooves, and C, how to make them look smooth and polished. Remember, this takes lots of practice, and you should always have assistance with you and help you with accidents.